The King and the Queen. Once upon a time there was an old king. He was 72 years old, and he regretted. And he married a little princess, only 21. It was like that all day long. She couldn't help it. It was biological. Now, she was very annoyed one day because she didn't have a son and heir. The king had been tired just a little bit too long. Sitting by her bedroom window when suddenly she saw coming up the drive a knight dressed in silver armor. Did she burn up? So she gave him a glance, but he wasn't looking up just then. So going to the closet, she took out a white fur coat made of 100 rabbits laid end to end. You know what rabbits can do. And slipping it on, she came downstairs very quietly. All the servants were playing poker, so they didn't see a thing. Now, when she opened the great oak door, the stranger saw by her beautiful expression that she wanted something. So, jumping right off his horse, he gave her magnificent present. She said, "Thank you very much. Is that all?" And he said, "No." So he gave her a dividend. And she went upstairs very quietly, and he jumped on his horse and went tearing down the street. He was a marvelous rider. Now the little princess was so excited to find out what the happy prince had given her that she could hardly wait to get to the top of the stairs, and what do you suppose it was? A little princess. Was she confused? So she put it to bed and went to bed herself. Now 2 days later she had a letter from the king. He'd been in Scotland shooting grouse. A lot of duty. And the letter said, "Prepare a great feast because I'm coming home with 300 brace of birds and a couple of friends." So she called down to the cook and said, "Prepare the greatest feast that's ever been given in this castle because the king is going to have the surprise of his life." Now, 2 days later, the king came back on an old, tired Kentucky singlefoot. But the queen knew he only got on the horse at the foot of the garden. He was always pretending. When he came in the yard, he made a lot of noise with his saber and said, "Where is Her Majesty?" But no one paid the slightest attention. They'd heard that old story before. So in a fit of rage, he lifted up the stirrup, took out a little rope ladder and climbed down on the offside the horse and went behind a bush and liberated all the hooded falcons and did those birds fly. He always did that when he was mad. Now the queen received the king in the great baronial hall made of virgin oak. Think of the irony. "Welcome home, my lord," she said with no enthusiasm. And he said, "Thank you very much." And from out of his pocket he took a little ruby necklace he'd given her 4 times and taken back. He said, "Is the feast prepared?" And she said, "Yes." And that night, the greatest feast the world has ever known was on. Lords and ladies in silver and brocade came marching in. Silver tankards of wine, peacock's feathers, when suddenly the doors opened and the only 6 blondes in town came marching in, bearing the baby princess. The queen rose with a great goblet of Chateau Yquem and said to my daughter, the princess, and everyone cheered. But the king, he said, "What nonsense is this? What nonsense is this?" He went around to the queen, he said, "You'll know I haven't been myself for 2 years. But she said, "I have." Now, at that moment, she looked down the table and spied the happy prince, who had given her such a lovely present. And he saw by her expression she expected him to say something. So he got up as any knight would do and said, "Well, I did it, and what of it?" Which only goes to prove if you try hard enough in this world, you can always find that funny little thing called love.